messieurs. Bon après-midi. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Now, I think we're even. Robert Hearing is. Hey, Marlene. Hi, Mary. Hi, everyone. Hi, Tish. Nice to see you. I am clothed. Yes, I am. And do I have reading glasses? No one will ever know. Hi, Casey. Hélène, bonsoir. Faye, hi there. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I heard it was World Naked Hiking Day. Yeah, I finished hiking for the day, but it was I think overall fairly delicious for the mosquitoes. Hola Maria. Hey Robert. I think I do have yesterday I actually walked up Mont Saint. Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine. Hi Mom. Hi. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we do have, and I'm really thrilled, we have a lot of people on board. Hi, Diane. Hey, Robert. So I'm actually just going to stop saying hi to everyone because it'll just get superfluous. I would like to. 1:30 in the morning in Ireland. Oh, well, thank you for coming. Go to my how good. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have my camera posted here just sort of precariously for a minute, but good evening. Welcome, Janet. Welcome to Belleville, Quebec. Welcome to Quebec City, ladies and gentlemen. But more importantly, this isn't really a tour of Quebec City. This is, of course, the solstice. It's the longest day of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere. Thank you, Lynn. So it's the solstice, but they did say it's Naked Hiking Day, but really in this country, it's National Aboriginal Day or First Nations Day, Indigenous Day. And I want to talk a bit about that on our evening walk today. Now, I am standing, if you haven't met me before, nice to meet you. My name is Patrick Toomey. I live out in the Canadian Rockies in Banff National Park, but I'm here in beautiful Quebec, the capital of what was New France, and the capital of the province of Quebec, and it is a spectacular city. I've been here for a few days. I went to Montreal today, and I came back here. So bien. And I'm standing up. Hi, Darla. Hello. Um, I'm standing up, and I've come here specifically. I'm up on the Plains of Abraham. This is not going to be specifically. Is that my buddy John there? But I'm up on the Plains of Abraham. So just as a quick, we should have, I think the numbers are still showing below. We have a big crowd tonight. So I'm going to miss some of your chat that goes by. If you happen to be from Bristol, if you happen to be new to Hago by chance, think of a little bit like YouTube Live. So I am here. I'm physically here. It is 8:30 at night here in the city of Quebec. Of course, this isn't home. I live high up in the mountains, but I'm here by the St. Lawrence. I'm here to share as much beauty with you as possible tonight. Sure, Danny. Hi, everyone. So the hellos could go on for hours, but at the end of the day, I see the chat, but I see at most 3 to 4 of the blocks that come by, so it flies by me. So, but with no further ado, maybe I'll just give you a little bit of a reveal. I have a Martello Tower behind me. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But let's just have a look at the sky this evening in the province of Quebec. So I'm not that far north. I'm in a famous winter city here, of course. And why is it a famous winter city? Well, they have upwards of 8 months of, wow, yeah, eight and a half months of snow. Sorry. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. I just swallowed a bug. So now I have to, the bug literally flew into my mouth. And that's going to end with me eating something bigger. Yeah, it's delicious, actually. It's good protein. I was actually a little tiny bit annoyed earlier because I came up to La Grande Allée to have dinner nice and lazily before, but it was so busy that I just swallowed the bug. Um, that it took them 45 minutes to bring me my food, so then I was in a bit of a rush. But there is the mighty St. Lawrence. I got part of the bug out. There is, you do, Chris. Well, they're British by nature, so we'll talk about them. But Quebec means, of course, where the river narrows, or narrowing of the river in the Algonquin language. I am looking straight south right now. Sunset is officially 8:43 this evening here. Now, my gorgeous little boy out there in Banff National Park is not doing a tour tonight, but it will be light way past 10 o'clock at home. So much lighter up there, but I'm further south. If we were to draw a line across the world here, we would be right down in sort of southern Switzerland, northern Italy. It's surprising how far south we are here, but we are hundreds and hundreds of kilometers inland down the mighty St. Lawrence. So this river here is flowing, hey, honey, from that's the west, it's flowing east. And the other day it was windy when I was standing up here, and people were out sailing. It was so cool because they ride the wind, which tends to come in from the east, going upriver, and then they turn around and ride the current downriver. Now, interestingly enough, even though it's beautiful to see all lighted up in the distance, that's actually a refinery out there. But I am up here on the plains of Abraham. Abraham himself was a farmer, came here in the early mid 1600s. Of course, the city of Quebec, or the community, New France, was established really fundamentally in about 1608. It's often called the oldest city in North America. Someone asked the other day about St. Augustine in Florida. It's a good question, but that was sort of a failed settlement several times. The only place that would challenge the settlement of this city would be St. John's, Newfoundland, but to what extent it was fully established is hard to say. So, welcome everyone. Now, I'm just looking down to the east, and I'm really hoping. The other night I had some beautiful clouds, but I just want to scan around. I will walk east. I'll walk towards Old Quebec on our journey this evening. Now, the last time, of course, I did solstice tours, I've been up mountains at home in Banff National Park, whereas I'm virtually at sea level now. But this is where I am, and it's fun to be here. Out in the distance there is Le Chateau Frontenac in the distance, and it has all the beautiful rainbow colors out at the moment because because of course it's Pride Month as well. Lovely to celebrate. But if you just allow me, this is National Indigenous Day or Indigenous Heritage Day in this country. And many of you who have known me for the last year and a half, we've gone through a long and particularly difficult and painful catharsis in this country that is not yet complete about what no other term could say but a genocide towards Indigenous people in this country through the residential school system. And that was fathered really by John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister, and the establishment of the trains. And I think that's a very important thing to acknowledge. I think solstice, and it's interesting because solstice plays such a huge role around the world. You know, earlier today I was texting with my good friend Dave Kavanagh, our guide in Dublin, and north of there, of course, on the Hill of Tara, you have a site that was built to celebrate the solstice thousands of years ago. Let me come back to that just for 1 minute here. So there were 4 Martello towers built here, and we're talking about the early 1790s. Now, why is that relevant? And we have people on board who are from the UK and say you have Martello towers over there. It is relevant because these are British towers, not French. Now, this city is about 96% French speaking. I too am a French speaking Canadian, but Francois Albertin, French Albertan. But they built these in preparation. Hey, John, good to see you, buddy. But they built these in preparation, of course, of what led to the War of 1812. By the way, we have a celebrity in house, everyone. John Wright up in York, who is a personal friend as well as a guide. But the War of 1812, of course, was the one and only time, more or less, that Canada and the United States ever went to war. Now, when we look across, so here's one of the 4 Martello towers here, and they have them down in Kingston, Ontario. If you've ever joined me for a tour, hey, Beth, nice to see you. If you've ever joined me for a tour in Kingston, Ontario, which I've done from time to time, we've seen a tower up there as well. And that is because from Kingston moving east, the St. Lawrence is actually the border between New York State and Ontario. Now that we're in Quebec and we're way up in La Belle Ville de Quebec ici, that is still Quebec on the other side. It's about an hour's drive south to get to the state of Maine. So that's where we kind of are in the world. Fortunately, after the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, exactly where I am up here in the UK, you would have learned Heights of Abraham. But this battle here, 1759, a third of the British Navy floated up this river, sailed up this river. They bombarded Old Quebec, and under the guidance of General Montcalm, the French sent out bomb ships. They missed the flotilla. They bombarded the city, but then they docked. And look where this cannon is down around here. You see some ships in the distance. Just down the valley here, they stopped and pulled in, and they scaled up these cliffs. They scaled up these cliffs, and just a little further west of here, stood out on the field, and under General Rolfe, the British lined up, and then Montcalm came out of the protective walls of the city of Quebec, thinking that they could defeat them. and they stood out and they all loaded their muskets. They shot, and in 16 minutes, the history of a continent really changed from French hands to British hands. So it's a fascinating. If I kept walking further east, and it's about a 15-minute walk from here, but I'm going to go west to show you some of course, historic Quebec as well. But if I kept walking east, I would get to the Earl Grey Overlook. Now, Earl Grey was prime minister for a short period of time of the UK, sorry, the United Kingdom. He had been a political Whig, but he was prime minister, I think 1830 to 34. I might be off by a date, but he is a British prime minister who I respect as much as I know about him, because in 1833, he was the one that brought about the legislation that ended enslavement or slavery in the British Empire. Interestingly, there was slavery here in Canada in the early days. It's often forgotten about, both in French Canada and British Canada. But the French Empire actually ended slavery quite a lot earlier in the 1790s. And that was an attempt to maintain support for their control of Haiti, which was the most valuable place in the world once upon a time, mostly in the 17th century up to the mid 18th century because of sugarcane, and it was a totally slave-driven economy. So one digresses on such an important walk through here, but this was all a farmer's field, and it's so interesting. Oh, Jim, there's no doubt, my friend. And interestingly enough, 1/3 of all French Canadians have Irish blood, and that was directly related to the Great Hunger in Ireland as they came here and the orphans were adopted into the Catholic families in French Canada. It's a gorgeous evening, but all of a sudden, I'm feeling a few raindrops. Now, as I look across, I find that tower a little bit unappealing. There's two sort of old towers here that I don't like, but the sky itself is just gorgeous this evening. Yeah, it is. It's actually starting to rain on me. I don't mind getting wet at all. I'm happy to get wet for everyone. There was a 30% chance of rain happening after midnight, but clearly it's starting to happen now. So my plan had been originally actually to walk west, but now I thought I'd walk east a little bit away from the rain. But I am standing up on the north side. How's it, Robert? Yeah. On the north side of the St. Lawrence River. Now, this magnificent, huge St. Lawrence Seaway. You can roughly say the St. Lawrence River itself is about 1,500 kilometers. That's quite all right, John, or 1,000 miles. But really, you draw a line from Lake Erie, pouring over the Niagara Falls into Lake Ontario, and then 300 kilometers long, of course, Toronto on the North Shore, and then it narrows at Kingston, and you come all the way up through Cornwall, through Montreal, not through Ottawa, but the Ottawa River, which is a massive river of its own right, is really just a tributary of this mighty St. Lawrence. And then that makes its way, isn't it lovely, Kathy? And that makes its way all the way up past Quebec here, and Quebec meaning in the Algonquin language where the river narrows. So this was the control for the continent. So yesterday, my students, I just finished a short student tour with lovely, every now and then one can feel badly about humanity, and then you spend a week with lovely, polite, enthusiastic young Canadians and lovely parents leading their group. I had a wonderful time with them, and I took them up to Mont Saint Anne, which is way in the distance up there. We went up and saw the Montmorency Falls and celebrated Lynn's birthday up there. And then I took them on to what is a ski resort. And of the 36 students I had, at least half of them, I think, made it pretty much up the mountain. So I ended up going for a big hike yesterday that I hadn't really intended, but it was really fun to do. Have you skied there, Mimi? Yeah, I skied. In fact, so the first book I ever wrote was called Ski Canada. My net profit was a solid $120 on it, but I skied across the country for a whole winter, and I dislocated my shoulder out there. But I've always liked it because I like the area so much. I don't like dislocating my shoulder so much, though. Um, I'm not in pain now. That's exactly right. Now, let's come back to this point because this is talking about the siege of Quebec here. So we call it the 7 Years' War. Sometimes they call them the French and Indian Wars, but I really want to come back to that point of the term Indian today simply because, of course, we're talking about National Indigenous Day. And that's because right here, of course, when we talk about the solstice, well, the solstice has been used by Indigenous groups all over the world, well, the world over, right? I mean, it's pure math. It's one of the very obvious things that you would have measured around the world. We're going to look out towards the Citadel. Don't worry, I'm going to take you out, but I'll just show you the early mapping of it. A way to make a calendar, exactly, Helen. So people will often learn. In fact, my buddy John is on board here and talking about the fact that the Romans never had zero, and they say that the Arabs came up with it, which they used, but it probably has roots all the way in the Indus Valley in India. But thanks, Scott. But totally independently, of course, the Mayans had zero. And the Mayan calendar, the Popol Vuh, if you're ever interested in that, was incredibly significant because the Mayan culture, which is the Mayan Triangle. I have a couple of articles about Guatemala on my website, but the whole Mayan Triangle area was fascinating. The Mayan population was a corn-based culture. They had a long life expectancy from all accounts, and they had this incredible math that at an archaeological site called Copan, which is in Honduras, just across the border from Guatemala, they have markings that are representing numbers like 60 billion because they had this ability. Thanks, Christine. You might remember, for my American friends on board, do you remember when Jesse Ventura was governor of, I think it was Minnesota? Excuse me if I'm wrong. Thanks, Lorraine. Nice to see. He started to believe that the world was coming to the end. Well, the Mayan calendar had basically 18, 20-day months or 20, 18-day months, and then 5 days of rest until the next year. They had a 365-day calendar. Brilliant. Now, up in this part of the world, Minnesota, thanks, Rita, and he just believed the world was coming to the end. They never said the world was coming to an end. They were just saying their calendar's resetting. So um, so that's sort of funny stuff. But in this part of the world, of course, Indigenous people understood this process. And I must say, and I'll even switch the screen, as a Canadian who lives in the Rockies, now I love where I live in the Canadian Rockies. I love Banff. I love my home. But we have like 9 months of snow, certainly 8. And we jokingly always say June, July, winter, right? Uh, it's amazing that we still had snow on the ground right at the end of May. Um, and now we've had the longest day, which we love. And then it will start to get already, it will go down. Jim, I have full 5 bars. So it's a little bit of the Canadian northern experience. But I'm hoping we'll see. So I think we have officially just had sunset here much earlier than it would be at home. And of course, if you're way up in the far north in this country, obviously Canada is the second largest country in the world, coldest country in the world, but you get all the way up north, they are on 24 hours of daylight. Do you, Marcia? So that is, to be honest, that clearly has to be a Hago gremlin or internet where you are, because I'm on I'm on full bars. So that's the best I can do. I am wondering, yeah, no, I mean I'm speaking as loudly as is appropriate. So yeah, I think it's either grandma. Now, there's a lot of festivities going on here because on the 24th, and I will be here, but it's Saint Jean Baptiste, which is the national holiday of the province of Quebec. Um, yeah, that's right, John. Yeah, and Matthew. Well, actually, I'll come back to that. So this is the grandstand that's all getting set up for all the festivities that are going to be happening here soon. But I'm going to wander away a little bit, to be honest, from the St. Lawrence, just because of the light changing. I'm going to take you in and show you some of the lights of the city. Again, if I were home, I would be doing this tour solidly an hour 45 later when I get up into the mountains. Um, but that's the nature of where we are in the world. So we're still quite low in the world here, but we're so far inland that we have this heavy continental climate. And I can tell you, merci Alain, and the province of Quebec gets a ton of snow here. It has been a beautiful couple of days out here. But just coming back, so National Indigenous Day, and many of you know I spend a lot of time talking about such significant things. There are roughly 63 Indigenous languages or language groups still spoken in this country, which is a pretty wonderful thing to have. It's about 2 to 4% of the overall population, but 1.6, 1.8 million Canadians out of a population of 38 million identify as Indigenous. That number is actually much more significant when you get out of urban areas. And of course, so vast a territory, if you're able to scan out the map, you'll see that about 80% of Quebec's population lives along the St. Lawrence River. That means if you're not along the St. Lawrence, you're out in very, very open, wild territories. I noticed people saying they're from northern Ontario up there. The province of Ontario, 14, 15 million people. Yet when you get north, it's just dotted, isolated communities where different languages like Cree and Ojibwe are still spoken. Even here in the province of Quebec, Indigenous languages are still spoken. And gradually, this country is coming to a lurching towards a catharsis and a conversation with the initial inhabitants of it. But we're here, of course, in what was established as New France. Hi, Aaron. Nice to see you anyhow. I realize that I'm just going through grandstands here. It's a little less exciting just at the moment, but I promise you I will get up to some lovely lights in the city center. We have just enough time for me to walk down and probably make it to the Chateau Frontenac tonight, which if you've been joining me on tours the last little while, you sort of have to include at any given time. But when we're on the solstice, it's a chance to come out for a nice long walk. But here we have, let me just show you what's going here. That says, Bon Fête Nationale du Québec. So, happy national holiday of Quebec. So, the Saint Jean Baptiste is more important here in this province than Canada Day is, which is just fine. That doesn't hurt my feelings at all. People here have a strong sense of identity and origin. And in fact, I showed recently on a different tour an actual monument that names the original settlers who came over. Can you imagine? So 80% of what is now French-speaking Canada came over from probably Normandy and Brittany, roughly from there. They come and they sail down, and there were two main settlements up in, there was Louisiana as well, totally different story. But two main settlements. There was L'Acadie along the Bay of Fundy, and then they come down and they establish themselves here in Quebec. Samuel de Champlain. Yes, they do call it national holiday. Yep, Casey. And l'Assemblée nationale, the national parliament. Remember that Canada passed a piece of legislation that says that Quebec is a nation within Canada. I don't have a problem with that because we have First Nations throughout this country. Right? Canada is not, hey, Natalie. Canada is not a nation, it is a country. It's a legal institution. No, that's right. But it is l'Assemblée nationale. Just like in Ontario, you have a parliament, whereas in Alberta, I only have a legislature because we really effectively were colonized by Canada. And we could have that for a conversation for another day. So that's the, I don't want to bore everyone else with the technocratic elements of Canadian constitutional law, but that's quite all right, Casey. But the establishment, so they come and establish themselves here. The first settlers come over. Now, just like with the Hudson's Bay Company in the west and all of the forts throughout the area, now there's a security view. I was just hoping, scan in for a second. Do you see the pride colors up on the Chateau Frontenac? That's just gorgeous. So I'm just going to keep moving and I'll come down to all the lovely historic center here. But they came over, and then for most of our history, you would come over and establish wherever you came to in whatever is now Canada or North America. And if you're in the northern half of this gigantic continent of Turtle Island, then suddenly winter would come and this river freezes up. And if the river freezes up, then you're stuck here. Well, you come over and there's an abundance of food, there's good fishing, there's good hunting, all sorts of fun things. And then all of a sudden, winter comes and the snow piles up, thanks, Henry, 1.5 meters, 2 meters deep. And if you haven't stored enough food, and remember, the history of the world was farm to table, right? And so if you haven't stored up enough food, you had a pretty tough time. And if it wasn't for the Indigenous people, if it were not for the Indigenous people of this land, the early settlers here would not have survived. And I think that's part of the memory. Now, built in to French Canadian self-identity is the belief that everyone is métis, is a mix. Now, it's probably 1 or 2%, but nevertheless, there was this idea that they were a fused people. Now, I'm just getting to Grande Allée, and I've already decided that I need to go up in front of l'Assemblée nationale because I can go up because there are lights on the fountain to celebrate this longest day of the year. Now, those of you who stayed awake for this little walk over in the UK and in Europe, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. I feel very honored to have you on board here today. But also, of course, it's gotten dark for you, but for people up in Scotland, Scotland is way, way further north than we are here, even though we're colder here, and that is that continental effect. Out at home, I really didn't. I looked earlier today. I think it was about 10 degrees this morning in Banff. Um, that's us in the summer. Although it's interesting, my friends from Manitoba were going home. They had to cancel. I'll just give you one quick image, or you can take a postcard of the battlefields there. But they were going home the other day. They had 40 something degrees. Well, John, it's lovely to have you stay up. But let's go see the fountain because it's just so beautiful. Now this makes me cross. Yeah, my best cross joke I can do for you. Now there must be some event going on. They're getting ready for the parties. So tomorrow I have a conference call in the morning, and I'm going to do one more Hago. Hey, Jenga. I'm going to do one more Hago here in La Belle Ville, Quebec. Catch up with Sam, who is our guide here and is a friend of mine. Catch up with him tomorrow, the next day. He also works in a brew pub, so I mean, what a perfect way to catch up. But then my group arrive on Thursday. My next tour, you might see, I did put up a couple of tours already in New England, and they are going to be, as long as I can time it out properly, they are going to be, there's going through one of the 3 gates into the walls of the old city. See that? It's just gorgeous to see the only walled city north of Mexico. So once I get a turn, when the lights blink, by the way, you're allowed to turn, although there's nowhere to turn right now. But I will be heading back down to Montreal. I will do a tour, though, up in Mont-Tremblant. So I can put up a tour, so I have to do that. I haven't put it up yet, sorry. I am taking the group up there. But let me come and show you the fountain in front of Parliament. And then if you have the energy and the time, we'll walk through the walls into the old town. I've taken you here before. It's just so beautiful every time. But look at the fountain coming out. Si, Maria. And then, yes, in August, we'll be over in Dublin. Finn will be with me, and I've already made plans with Dave Cavanaugh and with Hazel. Isn't it gorgeous? The fountain is lovely. There's no lights on Parliament right now, but I think sunset has happened. By the way, there's only one, hi Lucy, there's only one so-called skyscraper within the walls of old Quebec. Can you imagine how tiny this colony was? Fewer than 10,000 people ever emigrated from France to what is now Canada. Fountain is gorgeous. I will come back to that, I promise. I want to get it from another angle, but I just want to show you. There's the Price building. They're the one skyscraper in the old town. Look at the light. This is where I have to say, not that I am working for Apple, but the camera on this iPhone is just so gorgeous. But normally I always plan to be at the top of a mountain at home for the solstice. But I'm here, and I could have stayed in Montreal tonight, but I came back here because I have a deep relationship with the city of Quebec. I was a student here at age 15, 16, and then I've come back and I studied north of here again. But everyone loves Quebec. And of course, it's very touristy, but that's fine. Now, have a look. So, I don't know why the lights aren't on, but here we are at Assemblée Nationale du Québec. So there's the fountain. There's the government of Quebec up there. So the province of Quebec is sitting at about 8 million people, 90% of whom speak French as a first language. One thing, as just a side comment for people who know this part of the world, Quebec City has never been a particularly big place for immigration. It was more organic growth because of the massive birth rate within French Canada. However, I have noticed, and because, of course, there's a shortage of staff absolutely everywhere, here just like everywhere else, a huge number of new Canadians, thanks, Anna Marie, who, Diana, I don't know. It's been under work for so long. There are so many people standing here that I thought I would give it a minute and a half. Because we start at 8:30, and I feel as though maybe at 9 o'clock it might light up, and it might not. But there's just so many people standing out here at the moment. They might just be hanging out, but I sort of feel like we might just get some life coming alive on it. So why don't we wait and see? But let me just show around for a second, because up in the distance, now everything is lush and alive and vibrant here right now. The green has all come out and it's beautiful, but There you have Le Chateau Frontenac, of course, which is part of those great chain of hotels. That was wave two. I talk about this so much, but they say that it's the most photographed hotel in the world. I am so happy to live in a society where the most prominent features are celebrating Pride Month. And we have to, as many of us Canadians who share these tours together, we have to remain vigilant about that and always stand up for our pluralistic society. And that was the point I was making about just how much more diversity I'm suddenly seeing here. But the chateau is in there. Imagine though, well, if you think of it as 1608 and then till 1759, what was New France is all governed, thanks, John, from inside these walls right here. And it was so corrupt that part of the reason Montcalm came out to meet the British forces was because he wasn't sure he would have support within the walls. Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you can hear it, but the bells are ringing on Parliament. Thanks, Kathy. Are you able to hear the bells? Maybe not. Oh, you can. No? Okay. Well, I was just glad a few of you could hear them because it means it wasn't just in my head, which is really, really good news. So I don't think the lights are coming on. I have done tours when I've shown you, but let's keep going then. There's just so many people out front. There's obviously something happening. Sam, again, I just mentioned a lot, but he's our guide here, did give me a list of some of the things that were happening in town. Mimi is like the Bellagio, but, with less noise. Um, but let's head down to the gate. Now, some of you did walk here with me the other day, but it's just so worth it to come down on, thanks, Mimi, to come down here on our evening. I will just curve around for a second and look north. These are the Laurentian Mountains. So the whole north side, if you look out at the map, the whole north side, the smoke you see in the distance, by the way, is a pulp and paper mill. But the whole north side of the St. Lawrence was the termination of the Laurentian ice shield that occurred, of course, started to retreat about 13,000 years ago, exposed all of this. All the water. He was doing, I ran into him yesterday, day before, but he's working right now, Reed. But he did do a tour the other night, and I know a lot of people who follow us went and saw his tour, and it was a good one. But he's just been busy both. He works in well, it's not for me to talk about his life, but he has a couple of jobs. He works as a guide here, and he has another job. So he's just been, yeah. No, he did a tour just the other night, and we promoted as much as we could. But he's such a lovely, lovely fellow. Look at the gate here now. So 3 main gates on this side. There are 2 levels. Thanks, John. 2 levels to Old Quebec, Upper and Lower Town, of course. And the Lower Town is where the original settlement was. But seeing as how we're having a peaceful walk tonight, I think it's really nice to focus on someone who really encapsulated the concept of pacifism. There's Mahatma Gandhi right there, 1869 to 1948. The Quebec and Canada in general, but particularly French Canada, has really built an idea or a self-identity around peace and peacekeeping. And I think it's is that right? I think it's a pretty spectacular, broader concept to unite around because there's a lot of commemorative things out here right at the moment of different meetings. I'm just coming through here, so this is a little echo. I like echoes. That's what. But if I look over to the right here, this is commemorating 2 very hidden meetings between Roosevelt, Churchill, and William Lyon Mackenzie King, Canadian Prime Minister, when they were planning on chopping up the world after World War II. What I'm much more proud of are the 2 plaques you have in town for the foundation of the World Food Program that was founded here in Quebec in 1945. And I very proudly say my Irish grandfather, worked for pretty much his whole adult career for the World Food Program till they emigrated from Ireland to New Zealand at the end of the war. So I am inside the walls here. So suddenly I'm in the old walls of Quebec, the old town. However, and let's just have a little bit of architectural fun. How we're doing perfectly for time. Let's make our way right down back to the St. Lawrence to celebrate this solstice together. Incidentally, if I may just go off topic for a minute, I was stuck at the airport today for a while, and then because of travel, I didn't manage to see Aisha's two tours, which I just feel sick about because I chat with her. And Aisha is the guide, our guide. I mean, one of the founding people um, of Hago, who's down in Yellowstone. And of course, as you, I think, are all aware, Yellowstone Park is closed. So they would be excellent, Casey. I mean, she's just such a brilliant guide and a brilliant human being. Um, yeah, Aisha and I could just about start our own political party together. Now, have a look at the corner. See, having this, which looks very French to you, and it is, but it's really sort of Georgian architecture down through here. And then all of a sudden, in different places, in fact, I can show you one just on the corner if I don't get run over. Everyone's very law-abiding in Quebec, so I feel like such a rebel crossing the street. Look at the side of this house up here. See that big bay window standing out there? Have a look at that. So that's your Victorian architecture. Keep in mind, right? The British take over the colony in 1759. They signed the Quebec Act in 1863, which really pretty much terminates the French presence in all of this part of New France. And so then for another 100 years, but more importantly for 50 years leading up to the American War of Independence, which is only 10 years, and then the War of 1812, it becomes very British. And so here's where a fusion. These two buildings to me just encapsulate it. The building on the left with the curved roof is the second oldest up here in the upper part of the old town. And then check out this next building over, your bay windows, big slanted flat roof, which is very common in this province, and you have this very distinct Victorian architecture. Sometimes people come here and they find it so French, but it isn't. It is fondamentalement Canadien. It's deeply Canadian in all its fusion of identities and style of life. And they've done such a good job. It took a long time. The old town here was under construction for ages. Sorry, motorcycles. Some of you know how I feel about noisy motorcycles. But it is remarkable now how well this whole area is maintained and how well it's doing because, of course, major tourist destination. Have a look at that sky. I don't know if you're going to get a very good image with all the lights of the cars coming down, but you can see the gate up in the distance. By the way, are the postcards working well, everyone? I know someone was having problems with postcards the other day, and it worried me. But, good. Because these sort of lights. Now, the next time, and in fact, I was here, of course, in late November, and the winter lights were gorgeous. Bagage de France, if you want to. And now this is all the pubs and bars, and everyone is having a grand old time down here. Of the flags you see up there, the blue one, it's just blown away a little bit, but the blue one, hi, Joyce, but the blue one with the ship on it is actually a flag for the city of Quebec. And I think it's a lovely flag. And of course, it was all, Tish, it is. It's so nice. Once I'm back home in July, I'll put up a real. I do have one. I think on July 9th, I think I have a proper late night tour there, which will be awfully fun to do. I kind of was aiming for sunset back home because I couldn't do a solstice at home this year, but and of course missing my family, but it's so nice being down here at the moment. So we have, but 7 more minutes, and so I'll make it right down to the water. But coming around the corner on the right here is something that I find very, very disappointing because for years, for my whole life, this was one of the fun tour guide jokes. But this was a tree eventually they had to bring down. But why this tree, l'arbre au boulet, why this was important, wasn't it Greatland? Why it was important is that the base of this tree forever has been a cannonball. Now, they're telling the story here that it was from the siege of Quebec by the British, but there's a very real chance that cannonball was actually from Civil War here leading up to the siege, and that showed kind of the political rot. And let's just step back. If you're into this sort of history, 1759, France had pretty much bankrupted itself in just continuous wars with everyone. So 59, 69, 79, you're 30 years off of the actual French Revolution. Now, why is our French that we speak here in Canada so different from that in France? Well, first of all, and very importantly, we do not speak a patois. We speak classic Royal French. But that's because this area was separated from France, call it 1763 by the time the separation happens. So that separation occurs. And then in France, they have a revolution, and the revolution takes over Parisian French, usurps, you're welcome, Danny, usurps or replaces Royal French. So we still speak in Canada what would be a version of 17th century Royal French, whereas in France, uh, they speak more of a Parisian French. So that's one of the things. Look at the lights now. So there's Aux Anciens Canadiens, which is the oldest building up here. And then the old town, though, down below is where you really get the history of it. Isn't it lovely this evening now? Now, right at the end of the street, and we will time ourselves. Hey, Kristen, nice to see you. I'm just going past some Inuit art galleries. But this is what a lovely building, and the steep roofs. And it was your responsibility to clear your snow off the roof, which is very important. Thanks, Dirty. So let's head down to the end of the street because with the lights coming through quite nicely, right at the end of the street is the statue of Samuel de Champlain, who was the first governor of New France. Of course, Jacques Cartier was the first French explorer to sail down here, or up, we should say, isn't it, Louis? To sail up the St. Lawrence, and of course made it as far of what became the island of Montreal. He couldn't go any further because of the rapids, and they are to this day known as Les Rapides de la Chine, or La Chine, which means China Rapids, because of course Cartier was not looking for Canada. He was looking for the quick route through to Asia, to China. He really thought if he got past those rapids, he'd be in China. Of course, it was a bit like sailing with a long white cane, right? It was all sort of new to them. However, he did meet the Algonquin peoples from this area who pointed back to their village and said Canada, and he took that as being the land. That's why Canada has its name. But now I am just coming around to some of our gorgeous evening solstice lights, ladies and gentlemen. So the Great Canadian Pacific Railway, which really, I can tell you all the stories that say for every kilometer, 2 Chinese workers had lost their lives. But this great chain of hotels are, at the end of the day, what financed the construction of the railway, which then, of course, united Canada by bringing British Columbia into the Confederation, and was the birth of what we now call the birthplace of modern tourism. So have a look at that. So the Banff Springs, of course, where I live, is kind of the granddaddy of this. And this is the next wave. Isn't it just gorgeous? And I promise, I'm going to go out on the boardwalk and finish up a portion of the chateau. But look just down here. L'Auberge de Trésor. And just down to the left is Rue de Trésor, where you have all the paintings and the local artists. One of the many things, I'll be very complimentary of the Quebec thing. I have things that I'm happy to criticize as well. But so much now of the restaurant environment, the artistic environment here, is farm to table or locally grown or local painted. And so things are expensive, but it's actually authentic in its own way. Everyone's just visiting with Bonsoir and the fountains here. So there's the entrance through into the chateau. And I wandered up past here earlier today, and clearly the graduation ceremonies were going on. So let me just cut across here and we'll go back. It is beautiful. And we'll get our beautiful views as we can. So the sky was very pretty tonight. The other day I had the sky just totally erupt in a beautiful red, but I was out in the suburbs, so it wasn't sort of a place to do a last minute tour, but it's still awfully. Thanks, Diane. J'entends la musique, combat. Love so much live music out here. And now down at the back here, that spectacular building there is actually post office. So let's just come around onto the boardwalk. So if you can hang on with me for just a couple more minutes, we'll keep going. So solstice, and there's so many other things I hope to talk about tonight, but I've had to watch where I'm walking. By the way, if you have any doubts about how much snow and ice occurs here in the wintertime, Um, so just be very aware of that. But one of the ways, and I was mentioning Tara in Ireland, which of course welcomes the sun in on the solstice, but not exactly anymore. And that's because you may or may not be aware, but our world is on, well, everyone knows we're on an axis, but there's a wobble. So when you hear the New Age people say we're entering the age of Aquarius, that's actually true. It just doesn't necessarily mean anything. But because the world has a wobble, we have this 2200 year movement of the wobble, which changes the constant constellations that are the rising constellations on the tropics. Now, why is that important? Well, why that's important is if you know something was built to line up with the solstice and it doesn't line up anymore, then all you have to do is reverse the clock to get back to when it does line up. So, for example, the three big pyramids at Giza in Egypt were actually built to mimic Orion's belt, then it means they were laid out over 10,000 years ago. It, it allows us to date things like Terra to over 5,000 years ago. So it's a fascinating tool that we have, and it's pure math. There, by the way, is a ferret. We're looking across to the. It is so cool, and it allows us to. Isn't that gorgeous? So that is Levi. And so my buddy Sam here, who's of course our guide here, always says Levi is the better place to live in Quebec because you get to look at beautiful Quebec all the time when you're over there. And so they want to build a giant mirror. But out in the distance on the left-hand side of your screen is the North Shore. That's where I was up by Montmorency Falls the other day and all the way up to Mont Saint Anne. And you could actually drive for about 12 hours all the way up to Labrador. That way, if you went on the South Shore, the right-hand side, you drive all Newgrange is really what I'm referring to, John, exactly. If I go on the right and you drive out that way, you end up in Gaspésie and then also to New Brunswick. So, but it is vast. So the river is tidal almost to Quebec because this, just to come back to the argument, this is Quebec. This is where the river narrows. So that's the significance of it. And it's tidal to about here, but it's not brackish for a long time yet. But when you get up to Tadoussac, which is the most southerly Inuit or Inupiat community in the world, that is where the Saguenay River pours down into the St. Lawrence River, and there are beluga whales that come in there. And if that isn't pretty spectacular, I don't really know what else could be. The Saguenay River, a fantastic area, 2.5 hours north of here, up in the Saguenay Lac Saint Jean. There's about 100,000 people, isolated area. I did a semester of university up there. My only complaint with it up there is that was the first time I ever discovered what a black fly is. We don't have them where I live in the Rockies. So there is Le Chateau Frontenac tout le monde, celebrating pride, colors, diversity, and of course, university graduations going on here. La Belle Ville de Quebec. Thanks, Pamela. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have obviously so much more to show you here. I didn't really want to do a tour of Quebec so much tonight to share the solstice with all of you, and I'm really not into any of us being competitive, but I think I did last year in Higo, the first solstice experience, and we had so much fun that I really wanted to make it a thing. I remember when I did the winter one. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Did the winter one. I remember the sunrise. I was up on Buffalo Mountain, and we didn't really get a sunrise. The sky was overcast, but the sunset was gorgeous. But it is, and we honestly, these are these seminal moments in our calendar, right? These are things that we notice as people. You know, we are a species of patternicity. You're welcome, Lizzie. We're a pattern-oriented species, and it's important for us to have these markers. And when you live in a place as cold and northern as I live in, the longest day of the year is a significant thing. I've always cared about it. If my mom's still here, we would often barbecue until so late. Bueno, Maria, un abrazo, como siempre. So I don't know if I can get a very good day. There you are, moms. So I want to say peace and love everyone, and also it's an important thing, right? Indigenous culture, Indigenous Heritage Day, had a grandparent tradition, right? People lived long enough. In many other parts of the world, people didn't live long enough to know their grandparents. Oh, it's lovely. Um, and now that we do, but we still rarely make it to 100. And I think that's important. So we're celebrating a solstice that for 150,000 years, our direct ancestors measured their world against. And we lose sight of that because, of course, things seem so pressing. But there's going to be many, many, many more solstices than we'll have years. So let's actually maybe just have a bit of peace. Jesus, estamos en la ciudad de Quebec. Aquí estamos por el Chateau Frontenac. So you're very welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I saw that the tour said sold out, so I don't know if the count has been low, but the counters, really, I'd rather not know how many people are on board. I just love sharing this with everyone. But thank you for participating and coming along. I look forward to see some of your photos on the Voyagers page and in our camper van group. But big hugs to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. And for those of you in the way out in Quebec or in the UK and Europe who stayed awake, thank you so much. I know we're missing some of our other friends there, but yeah, Quebec City, Quebec, exactamente. Aquí estamos. So, sending hugs to all of you, and I might have a beer, but I'm gonna have a big sleep because I've been going nonstop and go to the gym in the morning. I will have a tour here tomorrow. So, oh, thanks, mate. So, feel free to keep in touch. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just let you look out over the narrowing of the river. Oh, mais merci, je vous en prie, tout le monde. I would just like to say merci. Gracias, grazie, obrigado. Arigato gozaimasu, tupadanchi kama. Danka, dankutak. Imawastich. Have a lovely night, everyone. Buenas noches. Bonne nuit.